She thought he stopped loving her. He barely looked at her, barely spoke. Every day felt colder than the last. So she found warmth elsewhere, in the arms of another man. A neighbor, kind, available, always there when her husband wasn't. And just when she gave in completely, the truth shattered everything. Her husband wasn't cruel. He wasn't distant because he didn't care. He was dying in silence, and he was pushing her away to protect her from the pain. What happens when love turns into guilt? When betrayal meets heartbreak? Would you forgive yourself? Would he? Have you ever been in a love story that broke you in the end? She used to wait for his footsteps at the door. Every evening, Monica would glance at the clock and smile. Just the sound of Jeffrey's keys turning in the lock made her heart leap. That was 3 years ago. Now, she barely looks up when he walks in. And when she does, it's with tired eyes, not love. Have you ever been like them? So in love that it felt like the world shrank down to just two hearts beating in sync, only to wake up one day and realize it's all falling apart? Monica and Jeffrey were that couple everyone envied. Soulmates, people said. The kind who finish each other's sentences, hold hands under the table, and post matching vacation photos with cheesy captions. But sometimes, even the brightest stars burn out silently. It didn't happen overnight. At first, it was just little things. Jeffrey started working late more often. Monica would cook dinner and eat alone. He said he was tired. She said she understood. Then came the silence. They stopped talking, not because there was nothing to say, but because every word led to a disagreement. Who left the sink dirty? Why he didn't notice her new haircut? Why she no longer smiled when he came home? It was like a house built on laughter had slowly filled with ghosts. Monica tried. God knows she tried. She suggested weekend getaways. He shrugged. She bought new dresses, hoping he'd say something, anything, but his eyes were always on his phone, or the news, or the ceiling. Every time she reached out, she came back lonelier. And the lonelier she got, the more hopeless it all began to feel. There's something soul-crushing about sleeping beside someone who makes you feel invisible. Monica would lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering if this was all marriage was ever meant to be compromise, silence, slow erosion. The woman who used to laugh so easily now spent her evenings crying in the shower so no one would hear. Her confidence cracked. Her spirit dulled. She no longer recognized the woman staring back in the mirror. Was it her fault? Had she changed? Was she too emotional? Too demanding? But here's the truth that no one tells you. When love fades, it doesn't always scream. Sometimes it just slips quietly out the back door, and you don't realize it's gone until you're already broken. They fought, more and more, loudly, bitterly. Words became weapons. Respect turned into resentment. Every fight left scars that no apology could erase. She wanted to fix things. She begged, pleaded. "Tell me what's wrong," she said. "Help me understand." But Jeffrey had already gone somewhere inside himself that she couldn't reach. And this right here is where the unraveling begins. Not with cheating, not with lies, but with two people who once loved each other losing their way and pretending they haven't. Monica's heart was full of questions with no answers. And in those moments when she felt like she was screaming underwater, there was one person who noticed her pain. Martin, their neighbor. The man next door with the soft smile and the quiet concern. A man who, unlike Jeffrey, looked her in the eye and really saw her. Who nodded gently when she said she wasn't okay. Who noticed when her voice trembled or when she wore that same sad cardigan 2 days in a row. At first, it was nothing. Just a friendly, "You okay?" When they passed in the hallway. A shared moment of silence on the porch when the house next door felt like a cage. But sometimes, the most dangerous feelings don't start with passion. They start with being seen. Monica didn't set out to betray anyone. She just needed to feel like she mattered again, like she still existed. And Martin was there, watching, waiting, listening. But this isn't a story about villains or saints. It's a story about people, about pain, about the slow, quiet death of a marriage and the unexpected places people run to when they're gasping for air. And that's where everything starts to change. It was just a glance at first. Monica was walking back from the mailbox, her arms full of bills and her heart heavier than ever when she caught Martin watching her. Not in a creepy, lingering way, but with concern, with warmth, with something Jeffrey hadn't shown her in months. That small glance lingered. And when she smiled out of politeness, maybe loneliness, he smiled back. It was nothing. And yet, somehow, it was everything. The next time she saw him, it was after another brutal fight with Jeffrey. He had come home late again, reeking of exhaustion and silence. She'd cooked. He hadn't eaten. She asked if they could talk. He asked her to let it go, so she went outside, just to breathe, to stop herself from saying something she couldn't take back. Martin was there. "Rough day?" he asked gently, standing beside his fence. She didn't answer at first, just nodded, biting her lip to keep the tears from falling. And then he said something that broke her. "You don't have to pretend with me." It was the first time someone had acknowledged her pain instead of dismissing it. No judgment, no advice, just presence. That night, she cried not from heartbreak, but from the strange relief of being heard. From then on, Martin seemed to appear whenever the world inside her home became unbearable. Like an invisible thread had started to form between them, tugging her gently each time she was falling apart. Sometimes it was just a conversation on the porch, by the gate, short walks around the block. Sometimes it was him bringing her tea, not with grand intentions, but with quiet consistency. Monica tried to fix things with Jeffrey. She lowered herself, swallowed her pride, apologized even when she didn't understand what for. But each time she reached for him, he stepped further away. Once, after trying to hold his hand during dinner, he flinched, like her touch burned. She felt humiliated, like a stranger in her own home. "Is there someone else?" she finally asked. "No," he answered coldly. "Just tired." Tired, that word again. It had become a wall she couldn't break through. And so the thread between her and Martin grew stronger. He never asked for more, never crossed the line. But Monica could feel the air changing between them, warmer, heavier. Their conversations lingered longer. Their goodbyes slowed. And one evening, after a fight so brutal that Monica nearly packed her bags, She ran outside in tears. Martin was there, as if he'd felt it too. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. He opened his arms, and she collapsed into them. It wasn't about lust. It wasn't about betrayal. It was about safety, about needing to be held. That hug lasted longer than it should have, and when they finally pulled away, their faces were too close, their breaths shallow. It was a kiss she didn't see coming, soft, hesitant, but devastating. Afterward, she ran inside, shaking, heart pounding not from guilt, but from the terrifying realization that she didn't want to stop. The next time it happened, it wasn't an accident. And it wasn't just after a fight. It was because she missed him. Because she wanted to feel wanted. Monica told herself it wasn't an affair. Not yet. But that's the thing about lines. Once they blur, they vanish. Soon, she was seeking Martin out more often. After Jeffrey fell asleep, after another silent dinner, after days of feeling like a ghost in her own home. It wasn't just physical, it was emotional. The connection, the intimacy, the kindness. She had forgotten what it was like to be adored. Martin didn't make promises. He didn't talk about the future. He didn't ask her to leave Jeffrey. But with him, she laughed again. She exhaled. She existed. And that became her new addiction. It wasn't just after the arguments anymore. It was on good days too. On days she needed a smile, a touch, a reminder that she still mattered. Martin became her secret escape. But no matter how many times she returned to him, a part of her always ached. Because even in his arms, she couldn't silence the voice inside her that whispered, "This isn't who you are." Still, she couldn't stop, until something happened, something that shattered everything she thought she knew. The guilt was like a second skin, now tight, suffocating, inescapable. Monica would sit beside Jeffrey on the couch while he watched TV, her hands folded neatly in her lap, her heart beating like a lie. Every moment in their home felt borrowed. Every glance he gave her, however indifferent, made her stomach turn. Because while her husband sat just inches away, her mind was somewhere else. With someone else, Martin. It had stopped being occasional. Now, it was constant. At first, it was quiet, hesitant. Secret glances, brief touches, whispered moments stolen in the shadows of doubt. But slowly, those shadows swallowed the light of her conscience. She began to seek Martin out, not only after the fights, but after dinner, during late mornings, in moments when the ache in her chest felt too heavy to bear alone. He became a habit, a routine, like breath, like a need. Sometimes she'd make excuses taking the trash out, going for a walk, needing fresh air. But she wasn't running away anymore. She was running toward something, toward someone who made her feel alive again. Martin never pressured her. He never asked her to leave Jeffrey, never said he loved her. Maybe that's what made it easier. He was simply there, available, real when everything else in her life felt fake. But with every stolen kiss, every late-night embrace, something inside Monica began to unravel. Because while Martin gave her what Jeffrey didn't, attention, affection, comfort, he couldn't give her peace. Her mind was a battlefield. She'd come home from Martin's place, flush with shame, and find Jeffrey curled up on the couch, asleep in a hoodie he wore far too often now. Sometimes he'd be sweating, sometimes shivering. She chalked it up to stress, But the distance had grown wider than ever. One night, she asked him again softly this time, without accusation. "Why are you so far away from me?" He stared at her, exhausted, not angry, just empty. "I don't want to talk about it," he said, before turning away. She felt like screaming. It was easier then to dive deeper into the escape. With Martin, there were no cold stares, no closed doors, no rejection. There was only warmth. And in that warmth, she began to lose herself. But life has a way of bringing secrets to light, even if the truth doesn't come from where you expect it. One rainy Thursday, Jeffrey collapsed. Returning home after meeting Martin, Monica found him on the living room floor, drenched in sweat, face pale, hands shaking uncontrollably. She screamed, called an ambulance, rode with him to the hospital, gripping his hand so tight she left marks. She begged the doctors to tell her what was wrong. They told her he'd known for months. Stage 3 stomach cancer. He hadn't told her. Not because he didn't trust her, but because he didn't want to burden her. Didn't want her to spend her days worrying. Didn't want her to suffer alongside him. She broke. Right there in the hospital chair, she shattered into 1,000 pieces. All this time, she thought he didn't care. She thought he was cold, cruel, emotionally vacant. But he was protecting her in the most twisted, painful, selfless way imaginable. Everything made sense now. The exhaustion, the distance, the strange weight loss, the mood swings, the wall between them. It wasn't cruelty. It was love disguised as silence. She went home that night to a house that no longer felt like a prison. Martin called. She let it ring. She sat on the edge of the bed, crying into the pillow that still carried Jeffrey's scent. She had betrayed a man who was trying to protect her. She had sought love in another man's arms when her husband was quietly preparing for the end. But it wasn't just guilt anymore. It was regret. Deep, knowing regret that made her feel like the worst kind of human. That night, she didn't sleep. She sat in the kitchen until sunrise, staring at the back door, the one she always slipped through, on her way to Martin's. In the cold morning light, she knew something had to end, and only she could decide what would be left standing when it did. The sun was barely rising when Monica walked over to Martin's door. Her face said everything. He knew. He didn't ask questions. "I can't do this anymore," she said softly. Martin nodded. He didn't plead. He didn't protest. His eyes, tired and knowing, simply stared at her. Maybe part of him had been waiting for this moment too. There was no big fight, no accusations. Just two people who had shared something deeply human and now knew it had to end. It's too late. She had betrayed a man whose only crime was trying to spare her from suffering. And now she would spend whatever time they had left beside him, not out of guilt, but out of love. A deeper, messier, more human kind of love. In the weeks that followed, she became his world again. She cooked for him, read to him, laughed with him, held him when the pain was too much. They really talked for the first time in years. And little by little, piece by piece, something unexpected bloomed between them again. Not perfection, not passion, but presence. Life will test love, sometimes brutally, sometimes silently. It will confuse you, isolate you, push you toward people and things that feel easier, softer, safer. But in the end, you have to choose, not the fantasy, not the temporary relief, but the truth. And the truth is, love isn't about being happy all the time. It's about staying, even when it hurts, even when it's hard, even when you've lost your way. Because sometimes the real love story doesn't begin until after everything breaks.